It's a pleasure to have my buddy Brian Kilmeade on the program. Brian Kilmeade, I'm convinced, has a identical twin. I'm convinced, Brian, you're everywhere all the time. I don't know how you do it. People say that to me. I said, well, compare me to Brian Kilmeade. I'm a real slacker. But it's good to have you on the program, my friend. And by the way, your multiple appearances on the various platforms talking about this war against Israel has been absolutely superb. And I just wanted to pass that on to you as well. Now, you have a fantastic new book out. This is a killer book. I really love this book. Teddy and Booker T. How two American icons blazed a path for racial equality. That would be Teddy Roosevelt and Booker T. And I want to ask you a question. I didn't even know that they had known each other. Tell us about this.
So what's interesting is they both wrote a lot. So I read Up From Slavery, which I think your whole audience has to read. And just have a kid that's 8 years old and remembers being called to the house on his plantation, and a soldier reads from a letter which he later would find out would be the Emancipation Proclamation, and his mom breaks into tears, and they hug him and his other brother and says, "We're free." They go back to the house, and they go, "Well, what do we do?" To bring us to that moment, and then to follow him as they go west to West Virginia. And at 9, 10, all he wants to do is learn to read and write and learn the alphabet, but he's got to go to the salt mines. And that kid ends up being one of the most respected educators in the country, maybe our history, ends up being treated better like a rock star in Europe, and then combined with presidents, especially Teddy Roosevelt, to make a real impact on the South. That was segregated. Mark, we don't duck it. There was segregation. Jim Crow was real. Poll taxes existed. KKK was there. Well, what do you think about a guy that was a slave and went back and put a school right in the middle of Alabama and said, about 1,500 at a time, I'm going to educate people. They're going to learn. They're going to do everything, learn the classics, but they all have to learn a trade. They have to be so good they have to be hired. But he needed people with impact. And Teddy Roosevelt wanted to fix the South. And when he was vice president, he read Up From Slavery. Him and his wife, and they go, we got to meet this guy, Booker T. Washington. And in 1901, they go to New York City, and they set up a meeting. He says, listen, I want to come down to Tuskegee. I like to see this in person. Let's work together. And then McKinley gets shot. He dies a couple of weeks later. He's president. We find the letter of him saying, sorry, I can't come. I'm president now, but would you come visit me? And they have this famous dinner together, but instead... And the dinner was referred to by John McCain in his concession speech. He was at one point, it caused a scandal when a black man was invited to eat with the president and his white family, and now there's a black man who's going to be hosting that. That shows you the progress of America. And this guy loved the country, and Teddy Roosevelt loved the country. And even though he was rich, he was sick. He spent his whole life struggling to live between asthma and cholera. This guy had bad stomach issues, bad eyesight. He had asthma, and that's why, in my humble opinion, that's why he lived every day and did like there would be no tomorrow. And he needed a partner. And I just thought, all over Booker T. Washington's own writings are Teddy Roosevelt. And I go, I got to get this. And then I went to Tweed, his great-grandson, who knew Teddy's mom, Teddy's wife, because she survived decades after him. And he heard the stories. And I go, what do you think? Do I have something here? He goes, you absolutely have something.
Wait. So you spoke to the grandson?
No, I spoke to the great. Yeah, he's on the back of the book. He advised me through the whole book. Tweed Roosevelt, who knew Edith, who was married to Teddy, and Sagamore Hill for him was a place with great grandma's house. He went over there for holidays. That was before it was a state park. So he allowed me to transport back to that time. And I just think at a time when quarterbacks want to take a knee and national soccer teams are embarrassed by our country and do it at a World Cup, I just think that people like Teddy Roosevelt and Booker T. Washington would be embarrassed about people that don't understand how far we've come and how much better we are than every other place on the planet.
You know, even during the course of the Civil War and immediately after, there was Frederick Douglass. And he and Lincoln became friends, but they weren't this close where they'd have dinner together and so forth. But they did communicate a lot. And the funny thing is, you talk about Theodore Roosevelt and Booker T. Washington. You have Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And then after Roosevelt, you have, of course, Taft, and after Taft, you have Woodrow Wilson.
The worst.
Who resegregates the military, who resegregates the bureaucracy, who rejects everything that came before him from these Republicans. And so you write this fantastic book about this relationship between these two men and how they were able to work together and how they, as you put it, blazed a path for racial equality and so forth. So how is it, do you think, that we've gone from a nation where minorities were mostly Republican because they fundamentally understood this, to where now they're mostly Democrat? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think about it all the time. Because in looking back at history, Lincoln's a Republican. People keep forgetting that. First Republican. This guy sacrificed his life to free the slaves, but he knew he couldn't do it right away. The country, even the North, wasn't ready. And I have a connection. I mean, Frederick Douglass spoke at Tuskegee, and Booker T. Washington looked up to him. And the link with Teddy Roosevelt and Lincoln's body comes down Broadway, and up in the second floor window was 7-year-old Teddy Roosevelt at his grandfather's house. He says, "You have to witness this moment." And he remembers Lincoln's body coming down Broadway. So he knew America literally fresh off the Civil War. And he worshipped Lincoln from that day. He understood his sacrifice. And Teddy Roosevelt's mom was from the South. Her brothers fought in the Confederacy. So if he wanted a perspective on America, all he had to do was go to dinner. And something flipped. I mean, the conventional wisdom is that everything flipped because LBJ gets credit for civil rights reform, and then Teddy and
that's
Harry
where my
Truman,
book picks up.
Yeah,
that's where my book
Harry
picks
Truman
up.
gets credit for the Jewish vote because he was the one who recognized Israel.
Yeah. The book is Teddy and Booker T. How Two American Icons Blazed a Path for Racial Equality. You can get it at Amazon.com. It's linked on all my social sites. You can get it at any major bookstore. And we're talking to its author, Brian Kilmeade, who writes these great books. And you feel like you're actually there, the way he writes these books and describes events and so forth. Let me ask you something, Brian.
Mm-hmm.
These ideas you come up with and the way you approach it and the way you approach a book, are you just thinking of connecting one book to another book, one historical event to another historical event? How do you do this?
So what I try to do, I never thought I could write a history book. I thought that was for the Dave McCulloughs of the world and the John Meach and those guys. And it takes them 10 years. But I had this idea about George Washington as a spy ring, and it was such a mystery, and it was in my backyard on Long Island. And I said, there's no way this is true. And I pursued it for 20 years, and I met people, family members, and I had just a yellow piece of paper, and I just thought this would be a great script if I can get someone to write a script, and I get quotes. And then one day I just said, you know what? They told me if you could just write this book, it's so much easier to make a movie. I just thought it would be based so much better than National Treasure. So I put it out there, George Washington's Secret Six. I approached it like a story because there's so much information that is still secret today that Washington put together this spy ring, and he said, without it, I don't win the revolution. And I couldn't believe how much undiscovered history there is out there. It did so well, it led me to the first war on terror. Jefferson fought it. The War of 1812, this orphan kid won it. The Battle of New Orleans, and then Sam Houston was mentored by Jackson. I go, let me continue there and find out about Texas. And it got me to the Civil War, and everyone's like, you don't want to write about race. George Floyd, you don't want to do that stuff. And I go, well, what if I had a link to talk about it? Two men made the country better. And then I just worked my way after that. I read up from slavery before reading Frederick Douglass's autobiography. And I just said, after that, I'm going to do this. And that just kind of moved up in that way. I can't do 15 years and I can't do a better look at John Adams or Harry Truman. These guys are just great. I mean, you read Hamilton or Ulysses S. Grant and you think to yourself, I could do better? No way. But I just thought if I help get the country to rediscover their history again and get people talking and make sure it's accurate, build these stories around the quotes, so make sure people know my opinion is not in there. I just thought I could do it. And then what I did is I took all the books and I go on stage. And I talk about it, like Thursday, and I'll be in New Jersey, at BrianKilmeade.com. I'm going to be talking about all my books and basically how America got great and all the stories behind there. And I'll let you know the unlikely path we took to existing, to surviving and then become the number one country in the world. And I can't believe it's like being with the championship team and they forgot they're holding the trophy. Mm-hmm. We're working around in this country and they don't appreciate what they have because they didn't have to earn it. So I want people to know the people that allowed us to get here while never putting myself in that weight class. But there's so many people around the Founding Fathers that did so much. I just wanted to see if I could highlight them.
And this is a fantastic book, as I said, but you write these books, you are soaked in this history. Much of the research you do, I'm sure, doesn't even wind up in the book because it would be too big. And then you see what's happening today. What do you think Booker T. Washington, Theodore Roosevelt, some of these great, great men who built this country, what do you think they'd be thinking?
Where's the grit? Where's the perspective? Why don't you understand where we're at? Booker T. Washington looked around, and he knew people for generations thought that he was lesser because of the color of his skin. But people were sobering up and understood it was just a matter of education. Benjamin Franklin the same way. The guy had slaves. He ends up an abolitionist. You grow in your life. So when people look around today, they want to call a lawyer. They want to complain about the cops. They want to sue somebody. They want to complain. They want to march. They want to protest. People that are successful and achieve take action. He was not an activist. He had to get stuff done. And if the Johnsons don't like him because of the color of his skin and the Joneses do, I'm going to go with the Joneses. And I don't hate the Johnsons because hate takes too much energy. I'm going to keep going. And the thing that gave him additional perspective, Frederick Douglass, too, is when they traveled. And I thought that Booker T. Washington said something so cool. He went to the UK, and he's noticed in Britain blacks were treated better, but they were content with their place in society. He said, I want to be in a country where there is no limits. I want to be able to work my way up. I don't want a ceiling. And I thought, how amazing is that? Instead of saying I could acquire, I could have a flat, and I could have this, he goes, no, the sky's the limit for me. Don't tell me I can't achieve. And they just kept going. It's like life is full of obstacles. We used to try to scale them. Now we want to complain about them, and we got to get back to it. I don't want to sit there and complain about people that complain. I want to let people know that there's people out there overcoming things, and they compete. America gives you a chance to compete. That's what Roosevelt did. He competed. They thought he was nuts to go into the war. They thought he was crazy when he was governor. They said, we're going to hide him as vice president. And they did. And the president gets shot, and that crazy guy becomes president. Mm-hmm. He's not a crazy guy. He was enthusiastic about every minute of his life. He appreciated it, and he didn't care what people thought. Mark Twain, for some reason, didn't like Teddy, but he loved Booker T. He wasn't caught up in why Mark Twain didn't like him. He noted it, but he's like, I got to move on because I got things to do, and I got a country to make better. And I also think there's something else. If you and you do this on your shows, it's really not. It's the Mark Levin show, but it's really about the country and the research and your legal mind and the logical way you think and explain and communicate. You're making the country better. You're solving problems. You're not trying to get people elected for influence. You're trying to get people elected to make our country better. Booker T. was trying to educate a country and a race of people that were far behind. He didn't complain about slavery. I'm watching Cori Bush yesterday, say, this chamber had me enslaved. No, you weren't enslaved. That was over 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. And now this country has given everybody an opportunity to put you in the House of the Representatives. How people have forgotten how lucky they are to be here would probably be on the tip of Teddy Roosevelt and Booker T. Washington's tongue.
That is so beautifully put, so profound. The book is Teddy and Booker T., How Two American Icons Blazed the Path for Racial Equality. You can go right now to Amazon.com and get it tomorrow. You can go to any major bookstore, any warehouse store, and go to my social sites if you want to link over there. And we're going to have Brian Kilmeade on my Saturday Life, Liberty, and Levin show right before his show. And I very much look forward to it, Brian. God bless you, my friend.
Hey, thanks so much, Mark, for all your support and having me on. I look forward to seeing you this weekend. I'm going to wear makeup, and I'm going to look really good in the suit, I promise.
Yes, don't put on a wig and a dress. That's a different show.
That's a different show and a different network, not on Fox.
All right, brother. God bless. Take care of yourself.
Go get him, Mark. Thanks.
He's a great guy.